Hello, everyone. Today we are here with Steve Abbey, who has a pretty amazing product, a one of a kind from what I can tell right now on the market. And knowing and having used many different products like this in the past, I'm very excited for him to explain it to us today and give us a little information about how he arrived at this. Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, Ryan?
Great, thanks. So I'd like to just start out with you telling us a little bit about how you got on this path to where you ended up with this amazing product that we're going to go over today and some other things. So go ahead and share about that.
I had a host of health issues about 30 years ago, and actually it was 35 years ago. And one of them was psoriasis. I had reactive hypoglycemia. I had chronic fatigue. I wasn't doing well at all. And I was going to doctors trying to figure out these different things, and it just wasn't working. So I ended up deciding I need to take my health into my own hands. And I started just going down this path of researching and really learning how to read peer-reviewed published journal articles and things like that, where I could really understand what was behind everything. And after I really solved my own problems, I just became fascinated and started looking into cancer and heart disease and diabetes and autoimmune conditions and osteoporosis. And I was just fascinated. And what I noticed is all of these things that were available, all this information showing all these things that we could do was not being translated out into the real world to be utilized by people. So I have been passionate about that and been taking courses. I've worked with naturopathic doctors, et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't until 4 years ago I sold my last business, which was a solar development business. I sold that and I decided I was basically retired. And then I was like, I still have a lot to give. And I decided to do something with all this knowledge that I've been looking into. And the thing that pushed me over the line is I was part of the team that helped a couple of really close friends of mine go through the last months of their life, and they were dying of preventable diseases. And the last one just was devastating for me. And I was just like, okay, so there's so much that we can do to prevent these things from happening. I spent literally 4 years designing and developing what I have now so that these things can be prevented. And it's all from Whole Foods, and it's a very different product, and it's very comprehensive.
Nice. Yeah. No, I was looking at it. I was looking at your website and everything, and I was very impressed by how comprehensive it was. Because we actually, at the practice here, have a greens that we use, and I was doing a comparison. It's it's got half the things that your product has in it, right? So yeah, it is very comprehensive. Can you talk about how you came to making it so robust and where that's headed now for your products?
I really wanted to make sure certain things were in it and there were certain things that were out of it. So I don't add any sodium, of course, because the American diet is chock full of sodium and we have too much as a whole, right? Doesn't mean that under certain circumstances, if you're a high level athlete, you might want to take sodium in some form for that specific event. But in most cases, Americans don't need it. So you don't need fluoride. In my opinion, that's crazy to put these are all RDA things, right? You don't need phosphorus, et cetera, choline. You just don't need these things. But what you do need are things like, especially if you're plant-based, you need vitamin B12. Right. Almost all Americans need vitamin K2. Mm-hmm. And most people don't even know it. Almost all Americans need vitamin D3, or that would be the best form of supplemental if you're not getting sunlight. And the CDC has done an analysis of where Americans sit with vitamin D and where they stand. And only about 5% of them get 35 nanograms per milliliter, which is still low, in my opinion, based on what I've seen for immunity, based on what I've seen for bone health, based on what I've seen for prevention of cancer, things like that. In my opinion, it is all of these things are critical to get in. And there are all these other things that are not part of the RDA. Mushrooms are fantastic. And having a consistent form of mushrooms for immunity and for a whole bunch of preventative, such as cancer and things like that, makes a lot of sense. But then it's the type of mushrooms that you have. You want to have one that are high beta glucan. You want low starch, so it's not ground up on the substrate that it was grown on. You want it organic, so it's not full of toxins. And you want it low heavy metal. So you have things like that. And there's just tremendous amount of research that goes into these things. And to me, I've been really trying to put together a product that can really change somebody's health trajectory. And so that's how I came to all these things. I'll give you an example. If you look at almost every product on the market, it's going to have, if it has a vitamin C in it of any amount, that's going to have an impact, right? It's going to have usually ascorbic acid or calcium ascorbate or liposomal vitamin C. Those all have a base of ascorbic acid. And the difference between whole form vitamin C and that is very substantial. And have you ever heard of how ascorbic acid is manufactured? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, roughly. There's a lot of chemicals used in the process to end up with that particular molecule, but it has no bioavailability from my understanding.
Exactly. I'll tell you, it all used to be made in a plant in New Jersey. That's moved over to China now. 95% of the world's supply of ascorbic acid is made in China. And what they do is they take high fructose corn syrup, they put it under incredible pressure, they put it under incredible heat, they do an acetone wash, and then they neutralize it with hydrochloric acid. And then in the end, you have a molecule that's chemically identical to what you find in nature. However, that alone has no vitamin activity, none, right. Zero. Yeah. So you have to have all the cofactors, bioflavonoids, and everything else for that molecule to be able to be used. And if you look at how it works in the body in studies, you can find anything. Some studies are going to show one thing, but most of the studies show a very substantial difference between dietary vitamin C and whole form vitamin C. I have one on my website under the research section where there's a study where it's looking at the progression towards heart disease as measured by the carotid artery, the thickness of the carotid artery. Wow. And the people that had the highest level of vitamin C in supplemental form were moving 3 times faster than people not taking any vitamin C at all. Whereas people that had higher amounts of vitamin C in whole food form were protected, albeit not a big protective effect, but it was protective as opposed to being detrimental. And that's the thing, gently getting normal physiological amounts of nutrients in a whole form way with all the things makes, in my opinion, a huge difference in how things are accepted, absorbed, and utilized by the body.
Yeah, obviously, it's an empirical fact with a study like that whatever's done and whatever you get out of that vitamin C, quote unquote, is not really doing anything for you, perhaps even harming. So amazing. Let me ask you this, because a lot of the audience that listens to this podcast and the clients at our practice they want to make sure that they have high quality products and that they're sourced very well. And I know you've done extensive research and work to make sure your product is very high quality. Can you tell us a little bit about the ingredients, where they come from, and why they're amazing?
So it's what I set out to do. And I was being a little bit of a perfectionist. So this is not necessarily good from a business perspective. So what I wanted to do is make a product that really covered people's bases. And when the original product, so I'm making one that's going to have flavorings and sweeteners so that people can just take it on their own. Some people are taking this just by itself, but it was really designed to be part of a smoothie. And the reason why I designed that, because if you make a healthy smoothie and you put this product in, you are so far ahead. There's only so much I can put into a product, right? But if you make, let's say, a 16 ounce or 18 or 20 ounce smoothie mixed with full greens, I already have greens. I have a full serving actually, it's even a little bit more than a full serving of greens in the product. But then you have greens on top of that, because only 3% of Americans get their greens. Only 2% get their orange vegetables. Only 12% get their nuts and seeds, et cetera. So what I do is I make a very healthy smoothie, and then I add this in. So what does this do? Let's say you have this amazingly healthy smoothie without my product. You have all these phytonutrients, right? You are covering And have you ever heard of the phytochemical index? Have you heard of that?
I have not, no.
So the phytochemical index is what percentage of a person's diet are whole plant foods, not refined grains, refined fats, or refined sugars, or even meat, dairy, and eggs. So all of that would not be considered whole plant foods. So that's what we're looking at. And there have now been a series of studies out of the University of Tehran Medical Sciences University, which is it's the most prestigious university in that part of the world, but it's a very prestigious, it's not the number one in the world, but it's very prestigious. But they've done a series of studies on the phytochemical index, and they were looking at it, the highest compared to the lowest quartiles, so the highest 25% compared to the lowest 25%. And they looked at like breast cancer for women, and they had a 92% lowering for the women in the highest, which was, I think it was 42% of their diets were whole plant foods, compared to the lowest, which only had, I think it was 14%. So Americans on average are at 12%. So we're even lower than their lowest quartile, just to give you an example. But then they looked at pre-diabetes, and it was a 91%. They looked at obesity. It was a 66% reduction. They looked at hypertension. It was 48%. Starting out with a smoothie, a healthy smoothie that has a nut or seed butter, greens. I usually throw a carrot in, some berries, and I put in cinnamon. I make it really healthy. You're starting your day with a huge percentage of your diet right there with whole plant foods. My product's not even in it. But then my product comes in, and all of a sudden it has mushrooms that aren't in normal smoothies. It has turmeric, which I'm sure you know is fantastic from an anti-inflammation, et cetera, anti-cancer, things like that. Then it has specific nutrients. Say you're not going to have any iodine to speak of in a normal smoothie, right? You're going to have tiny amounts, but I have 170% of the RDA from a blend of 3 organic kelps from Iceland, which is far away from any industrial center. It's a form that your body can handle. It's with a full spectrum of minerals and a green leafy vegetable. It is very different than taking potassium iodide. It is not the same in terms of how gently it goes into the body, and really make sure. And then for plant-based people, I have a vitamin B12 from mushrooms that are grown on the bacteria that creates vitamin B12, and then it goes into there and it gets stabilized. So it's a whole form of B12, and I'm going to have, 1,800% of the RDA, because only a small percentage gets absorbed. It's a water-soluble vitamin, et cetera. So I try and cover all the nutrients that are needed in a whole form way, while covering them with the big things, like it has a full greens blend in it with cruciferous vegetables. It has a berry blend, because berries are pretty much the most nutrient-dense fruits. It has a probiotic in it, 10 billion CFUs of several bacillus strains, which is great for repopulating the gut. But what you really want are the prebiotics. You want to feed what you have. So I have, 7 grams of fiber in it. So it's a huge amount of fiber and pre-fiber, and then it has mushrooms, et cetera, et cetera. Won't go on and on, but it's a very comprehensive product.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was like I have not seen a product like this, to be honest, with this many options in it. Let me ask you about a couple that I'm not familiar with, at least how they're listed here. There's one called ubiquinol. What exactly? I know it's an active form of CoQ10, but how do you get that in there, and what is that there for?
It's not going to be in my new product, and it's not because it's not good. It is a good thing. It's super expensive. And so the reason why I put it in there is because ubiquinol is the active form of CoQ10, just like you said, right? And some people, especially people that are over 55, 60, they start having trouble converting CoQ10 to ubiquinol, which is the active form, which is what your body uses to make ATP. And if you look at the amount of CoQ10 or ubiquinol in the body, it starts going down, especially in the places that are really important, like the heart, the liver, the kidneys. This is really important. And so for older people that are having any sort of like ejection factor of their heart, if their heart is not pumping enough blood, they need to up their amount of ubiquinol would be the best way to get it. And
Mhm.
there's a company called Kaneka, which is the only manufacturer of it on the planet. It is
Wow.
extremely expensive. There's a company that sells tablets of it, and I can't think of their name. I think it's Healthy Origins. And it's a very good way to do it. So if somebody, and you're listening, I have no connection with this, but I think it's called Healthy Origins. You can get it on Amazon,
Mhm.
and they sell 100 milligram tablets of ubiquinol. It's just a very good way of covering and helping the ATP in your heart, as well as your kidneys and liver and things like that, from really having the energy to do what it's supposed to do. And I think that is a critical thing.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's new information for me. That's awesome. And thank you for sharing how to get it and where we can find that. Now, when I had heard you talk before, and when we were talking a little bit before this, you had some pretty amazing stories about people using your product and getting amazing results and changes in their blood work and health and all that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I am running a couple of studies right now, and I have a friend who has a tree trimming service, and he has 70 guys that are in it, and he is going to have his whoever and his team wants to do it, and they're just going to have a smoothie a day. And this is what I've already done. I'll tell you about that story, but we're going to take their blood in advance, and then all their team, they have a 10 o'clock break, and they're all going to have a smoothie every day, and then we're going to take their blood again. And these guys, I think some of them have diabetes, some of them have hypertension, and we're really going to see how much we can change that. And I'm going to not just do my product, because some of my future ones are going to deal with blood pressure and blood sugar
Mhm.
support, right? So I'm going to be adding additional things in there. For people that don't have that, we're just going to follow them and see what happens to their blood. But right now, I've been working with a guy, Forrest Galante, who is the host of Animal Planet, Discovery, Shark Week, and he's a really fun, capable guy. And we took his blood. I pitched him on this idea. I said, "Hey, you've got a big following. Let me take your blood and see what it shows, and then let's do a smoothie for a few months, and let's see it again." And he said, "Sounds great." We took his blood, and I told him, "I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make, because you're a young, healthy guy." I think he's 34 now.
Hmm.
And as it turns out, his inflammation, as measured by something called C-reactive protein, which is the red zone, which you don't want to be in, starts at about 3. You want it to be low, right? And he was at 10.9. So it was way too high. And we ended up having to stop this a little early after 6 weeks, because he ended up going on a shoot in Australia and Africa. So I said, let's just take it. We'll see if anything happened. It went
Mhm.
from 10.9 to 1.6. And we
Gosh.
just took it again July 31st, and it was down to less than 0.2. Now, I don't know
Mhm.
how it was able to be quite honest. I didn't expect that big of a result. I don't know why it was so high to begin with, but he
Mhm.
also started out pre-diabetic, or as measured by A1C, and it
Okay.
was 5.7. So it was just inside of pre-diabetic.
Sure.
It dropped to 5.0. So a very good result. Then
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. We had oxidative stress as measured by F2 isoprostane and 8-OHDG, et cetera, et cetera. All these things got better. Plus we did a micronutrient panel, and he was out with, I think it was 5 of them. 100% of them got in the July one. So that was after almost 7 months of doing this. But we had a really good result. And I want to do this and really demonstrate it with a larger group of people, because
Mm.
to me, I'm just excited to see what can be done, especially when people have issues like diabetes or hypertension, because there's so much more that we can do than just take metformin or take just so many of these drugs. I think there's
Yeah.
tremendous amounts of other things we can do before we go down that route. I'm not throwing drugs under the bus. I'm just saying there are other things we can do lifestyle wise.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, just to be upfront, some of those drugs need to be thrown under the bus. But
I
overall
agree.
speaking, yeah, having a product that supplies this amount of nutrients in a whole food form is pretty unheard of. So I can see why you get those type of amazing results. That's really awesome. And I'm excited to see what happens with this other pilot group you're doing as well. see what their results are. So let me ask you this. You touched on this earlier, the synthetic versus the natural whole food form of different nutrients. A lot of our clients and my listeners are already familiar or have at least an interest in moving in that direction. You mentioned vitamin C, but is it as important with other nutrients as well and other different factors that are in your product to the same degree, or how does that work?
So how do I say this? If somebody's getting a fairly balanced diet, but they're low in, let's say they have plenty of vitamin C, but they're low in zinc, the vitamin C that's in my product is not going to be helpful for them, but the zinc will be very helpful. Or if they're low in iodine, because iodine, even though I'm putting in 170% of the RDA, the reason is because there's so many goitrogens. So I have no idea what people are missing. I do know what percentage, according to the government, each item is missing. And I think the amount that people are accepting of iodine, it used to be 4% of people were low in iodine. Then in 1998, it was seen that half the amount of iodine that was, the way it's tested is in the urine, right? People were excreting half the amount, which means that they were getting half the amount of iodine in their diet, because iodinized salt was not being used as much, which is not a great form of iodine, by the way, and because it's not absorbed and it's got some problems. Let's just say that. But there are all these goitrogens as well. We have chlorine, which a goitrogen is something that blocks the absorption of iodine. And there are three main substances that are that. Chlorine would be one, bromide would be another, and fluoride would be another. And what is it? 65% of our water supply is now fluoridated. So that's right there is blocking a lot of people. And it goes into the products for the people that are not in that segment. So if you buy a product that's manufactured in Michigan, where it's highly fluoridated, and you're in California, you're still getting a lot of fluoride.
Right.
And to me, I would highly recommend people stay away from fluoridated things. I don't think that's a healthy thing. That's just my opinion from all the research I've done. But you have all of these things that are blocking the absorption of iodine. So having a consistent, healthy, absorbable, natural source of iodine is important. Same thing with zinc. It's important for both men and women, but I'm going to speak to men just for a second. There are all these people taking testosterone cream, right? And it works, it can work very well, but it impedes the biofeedback mechanism of testosterone. So your body sees, oh, I'm getting testosterone, so I don't need to make it. So its own endogenous or internal production goes down often. So you end up becoming almost addicted in a way to getting the exogenous. It's not necessarily the best way. So there was a study for zinc, and it was a correlation study, and it looked at how much zinc people were getting and how much testosterone. This was all for men. And there was a high correlation, but correlation does not mean causation. So they took a group of young men that had good testosterone levels, and they put them on a zinc restricted diet. I would not want to be on this study. They lowered their testosterone by 73.5%.
Wow.
And then they took men that had low testosterone, and they gave them zinc, 30 milligrams. Their testosterone went up 92.5, and those people's testosterone levels crossed. Now, you don't need to take drastic amounts. You just need consistent, healthy amounts, and you need it balanced with copper, because those are antagonistic towards each other. So you need to have both, or you'll make yourself copper deficient if you're just taking zinc. So there's a lot of thought that goes into each and everything, and people, whatever they're deficient in, is what they need. If they're getting in their diet plenty of, let's say, vitamin A, then adding more vitamin A is not likely to hurt them, especially in a plant-based form. It can hurt them if you're getting it in a different form, but in a plant-based form, you're not in the form of beta carotene or something like that, is not, or lutein or any of those. You're just not going to get hurt by it. But there are others that you can have too much. But that's what I'm trying to do, is gently match all of these different things for the things that Americans are deficient in.
Wow. That's really awesome. It's really amazing. And thank goodness you are. It's an epidemic out there of lack of nutrients. And everyone's feeling it. And the other thing, I'm just super impressed with your knowledge base and all the research you've done on this. And can you speak to a little bit about how you gathered all this information and developed the research and whatnot?
As it turns out, I have a curious mind, and I've been studying it on my own, but I go in and I go to conferences, I take classes, I've worked with naturopaths, and when I work with somebody, I share information, and I love the collaborative thing where you share, because I am sure you have a ton of knowledge that I don't have, and I'm sure if we chatted, we would figure out where some of those things were, and I get really fascinated by that. So between the studying, working with people that are very smart, and just being incredibly curious, I've just collected all of this. And then I've started working with people and trying to really create a way for them to proceed forward. Has been a very learning experience. And even while I had other businesses, like the last one was a solar development company, which it's just not my passion. I never really, I was doing it and it had some excitement to it. And there was but I don't really care. There's some good things about solar, but there's some, in my opinion, there are better technologies that are very alternative than solar. That's a whole nother thing. But this is something that seeing people get better when they didn't know that they could is a real excitement for me.
Yeah, amazing. Let me ask you about this. So a lot of the clients that I work with are interested in changing their body composition. For guys, they want to put on muscle, maybe lose some body fat. A lot of the women I work with want to lose body fat. Could be for many different reasons, whether it's just health or it's because they want to look better. It's usually a combination of all the above. So how would your product lend itself towards assisting people who are looking for that sort of assistance?
So when you're talking about losing weight, so the first thing is having a lifestyle that this can be done for a long time and it's very healthy. So people can lose weight for a short period of time doing a restrictive diet or doing a really unique thing. But if it's not part of their lifestyle, it's really not an effective way to go. So to me, critically important is to understand what weight loss is, what it is for them, and what they are willing to do that is projected out into the future. So I'm just going to tell you what my beliefs on what weight loss is, or weight gain is, where people are having obesity and what that is. I know about emotional connections with it and stuff like that, but I'm not going to speak about that aspect right now. What I'm going to talk about is it is a dysregulation almost always of the system. We are built to be in homeostasis. We are not built to gain extra weight. And there have been feeding studies of prisoners where they were force fed like literally 100,000 additional calories and they barely gained any weight and they hated it. And then right at the end of the study, the few pounds that they did gain, they lost and they went right back. So their system was regulated. And if you look back in history at all the kings and queens, it was extremely rare for kings and queens and all these royalty that were having 7-course meals 3 times a day and all this other stuff to be overweight. There was King Henry VIII and you had Louis le Gros, which was Louis the Fat. And those were like outliers, right? Why was that so few of these eating tremendous amounts? It's because they didn't have the endocrine disruptors at that time. Their bodies were in homeostasis to a great degree. Could they override that? Could they get thrown off? Yes, some people did, but it was very rare. It was not common. In this country, there was a study done, and I believe it was the 1890s, and 1.07% of the adult population was considered obese. Today, according to the CDC, it's 41.9%. That's from 2017 to 2020. So you have this ginormous increase and it's just taken off. And the CDC is predicting by 2030, it'll be 50%. Okay. So you have this, and we're just going, what's causing this? Let me throw out a couple of things. There's something called BPA. I'm sure most of you've seen BPA-free bottles, and it is a substance that is considered an endocrine disruptor or hormone disruptor. Mm-hmm. And it impacts something called adiponectin. And adiponectin is the diabetes and obesity hormone, or one of them, but that's one of the main ones. It's called that, like when people refer to it. And that gets impacted and lowered substantially, putting people at much greater risk of developing obesity. Then you're looking at things like EMFs and how that can, if you look at pregnancy of women and their children being followed out 12 years, the children that were exposed to the most EMFs had substantially 2.8 times the level of the low exposure. That's comparing one exposure level to another, not something to nothing, but one to another. Mm-hmm. So how do people, given all this thing, how does somebody deal with this? So there are many ways. It's what they're willing to do and what fits into their lifestyle. One is you can preload your meals. Preload it with water. Half an hour before somebody eats, drink 16 ounces of water. It will impact substantially how much food you eat, even though you're taking in no calories. Being hydrated is great. Also, eating low calorically dense foods, such as an apple, which is very low calorically in terms of the amount of calories. In the studies done on those where people ate an apple beforehand, like 20 minutes before, because you want to eat it with enough time so it gets in and your body starts almost getting satiated, even though it's triggering a little bit of, I'm almost getting ready to eat. It will lower how much you eat. And when they did these studies, people ate about 200 calories less during the meal. So having 100 calories actually impacted how much they ate by 200 calories, and it's super healthy. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of thing that people can do. And then you look at what are really healthy diets. You want to just have, from my perspective, really nutrient-dense foods that are low calorically. And if you look at this, you look at a strawberry. If you were to have, let's say if a man was eating 2,200 calories, that's about 15 stomachfuls of strawberries. You're never going to be able to eat too many calories on strawberries, right? But if you look at how much that takes from an oil perspective, it's a third, 2/3 a cup of oil would cover that. It's something like that. I don't remember the exact amount, but the bottom line is it takes drastically less. Oil is a huge thing. Mm-hmm. Refined oil and refined sugar makes up 42% of the American diet. Refined grain makes up 20%. So 62% has almost zero nutrition, and it has 62% of the calories. And so it puts people at risk of developing obesity as well as a whole bunch of other chronic diseases. So I could go on for hours on that, but I didn't mean to spin out on that. So
no, that's great. That's really good information. And so your shake would obviously be super, super dense in nutrition and value there. So that would help counteract, as well as getting a healthy diet in, these things and help people move towards weight loss.
Especially if they're low in specific nutrients, because there's specific micronutrients that when you're not there, it triggers the body to be hungry. But also, I'll give you an example. If you look at iodine, if somebody's low in iodine and their thyroid is not working adequately and they go into hyperthyroid, one of the side effects of that is weight gain. But there are other ones. Selenium is directly connected with the thyroid function. And then you have other ones like magnesium, et cetera. Having the micronutrients there is critically important. Also, fiber is super, super important, because fiber later as it's going through your body is creating in your intestines and colon, it starts to create something called butyrate, which lowers the desire to be hungry, or the satiety, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important to have that. And there are all these things coming together. There's a full plan that I would do when I work with people that have obesity and they're willing to make the changes. There are also supplements you can take, but it's not so much about supplements. I'll give you an example. Black cumin seed. If you buy black cumin seed, it lowers hunger, and it's been shown to lower weight gain over months, but it's a tiny amount, but it's easy to take. There are things like that you can add, but all these other things, like getting the overall direction in a healthy direction to really take care of that so that you protect your lean body mass, but you lose weight. Because a lot of times when people lose fat or lose weight, you can be losing 2/3 of lean body mass. And
Right.
so it's really critical to retain that because your lean body mass is directly connected with longevity.
Awesome. I love it. Totally agreed as well. Great stuff. Okay, good. We have how amazing this is and whatnot. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about some things that I just thought of as you were talking about it. So there is a lot of fiber and prebiotic in your product. For those people who are maybe have a tendency towards bloating or whatnot, do you have a protocol for someone who's experiencing digestive issues but wants to add all these nutrients in, but maybe avoiding the bloating that could come from that part of the product?
So bloating can be an issue. So I'm glad you brought that up. What I suggest, if you look at the research, people really shouldn't move more than 5 grams of fiber more in their diet in any week. So you should slowly build it up. So when I'm having, like I have usually about a 24-ounce smoothie a day, and I have a full dose of my product. So we're talking about 25 grams of fiber. For most people, that would be too much and would cause bloating.
Yeah.
And that's because if you look at fiber, how important it is, it's really fantastic from a whole bunch of levels. But I don't tell people to do that. I tell people to start with a much smaller amount and start with half a serving of my product. And even for some people that has a very sensitive stomach, to start with even a quarter. And it's a food. It really is. It's a very concentrated food. And so I tell people to give it time to almost get your body used to it, used to the fiber and the concentrated nutrition. And so people, if they start out with, let's say, half or even a quarter of a serving in a smoothie and then slowly build up to a full dose. And you don't need to take my product at a full dose forever. It's really to build up the micronutrients. And by the way, the only people that I don't mean to say it this way, but the only people that have had a problem have been really women, and I don't know why women specifically have had it, but even when they just start out low and they just give themselves some time, they can build it up.
Makes sense. Yeah, I figured you ran into that and had a workaround for it. That's why I wanted to ask. So awesome. And then are there cases where somebody's maybe working on really building up their body, or they're an athlete, where they would want to take even more than the recommended dosage?
Nobody's ever asked me that question. I would say there's not really, the full dose is really designed to cover that. But if, let's say, there was an athlete, I would be targeting specific things. Like, I'm going to be making a product for athletes at some point, and it will have things like nitrates, because nitrates are basically the only thing that's ever been shown to increase oxygen utilization. And that's why during the 2012 Olympics, all the beets were sold out for hundreds of miles outside of London, because all the athletes were buying up all the beets and making beet juice, because it's one of the high nitrate foods. And they were actually getting a really good spike in the utilization of oxygen. So it's a fantastic source, but it's not in most things. So one, I would be putting that in there, and then some of the electrolytes. And really, a lot of the products that are on the market for electrolytes, they're all synthetic. Yeah. Most of them are not complete. They have no antioxidants in them. So if it was an athlete, I would be having antioxidants there, because you're creating oxidative stress, especially in these really long runs. And I'm working with a guy that's winning these ultra marathon, and he won 100-mile race, and he wants to do a 200-mile. I'm just going, oh my God, I don't even know where to start with that. But if you look at the DNA damage from something like that at the beginning, where somebody is at a very low level, and then at the end, your DNA damage is off the chart. And so you can protect that to a great degree by having antioxidants during the course of that time. Having nitrates, having antioxidants, and having full spectrum electrolytes is what I would say for the athletes that are listening right now. And yeah, that would be what I'd say.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Yeah. I'm just curious, is there a standard for full spectrum electrolytes?
When you say a standard, what does that mean?
Is there an approved, this is the full spectrum of electrolytes you need for different activities or something like that you've come across in your research?
So there are 6 electrolytes or 6 nutrients that are really considered electrolytes: sodium, chloride, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and one other.
Magnesium.
And there is no specific amount. The thing that I've done is gone into the studies and looked at what is needed and how much this, and I've come to the best conclusion. I haven't finished, but I've designed what I would do in that case. Wow. But it's still a work in progress. I probably won't have this product for another year or so. Okay. And I really want to have it, because I'm a perfectionist this way, to have it perfect, to really impact people. And this will all be from Whole Foods.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah.
The last one is potassium. That's
potassium. There we go. Okay. Nice. Okay, great. That sounds very exciting. Yeah, well, keep me posted on that one. So if you're talking to somebody and they're running into some sort of issue with their health, and it's like a long-term chronic thing, and it's not something they've just had for a couple of years, but it's long-term, do you have any experience with people getting over or improving their condition, however we want to place that delicately, that situation from using your product?
Yes, very much. And I have a friend, Tamara, who was diagnosed with diabetes. She had an A1C of 9.5. So if any of your listeners know what that means, you're not only diabetic, but you are a raging diabetic at that point. Yeah. And we sat down because she knows what that can lead to. And she was already having some neuropathy. And I went over and restructured a bunch of things. So it's not just my product. So she decided, here's what she did. She was doing intermittent fasting. So for those of your audience that don't know, she was starting eating at about 8 in the morning and she would end at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So that is a very restrictive time of eating. And then everything else up beyond that was just water or just tea without anything. So not to any additional calories. And she would have a smoothie for breakfast, a smoothie for lunch. And then she was having, her term was just a normal, very unhealthy dinner. So it wasn't, but she was having 2 smoothies. So that was a good start. Okay. But then I had her doing a whole bunch of things that have been shown to be incredibly good for diabetes, right? Mm-hmm. Things like berberine. That's not in my product, right? Because that is not it's not for people to take care of their diabetes. I do have things in there, and that's why the forest person that I mentioned had a blood sugar lowering. Turmeric will help, amla will help, et cetera. There are all these things that will lower blood sugar if it's needed, but it's not designed to just lower. But I would add things like berberine, amla, turmeric, et cetera. And so I had her on a bunch of things like that. But she started losing 2 pounds a week. Her blood sugar went, and in fact, I have it right here where she sent me her 24-hour, what was going on in her blood, and her blood sugar numbers got too low. And I said, wow, you need to back off because you're going down too low. And so there's so much that can be done. Hypertension is the same way. And these are 2 big issues in our country. In 1958, it was 0.9% of Americans had diabetes. What is it now? I think it's 13%. That's a ginormous amount. And then prediabetes, it's almost a third of the United States adult populations. But there's tremendous amount that people can do with their diet if they're willing to do it. So when I'm just telling you that, it wasn't just my product. It was much more than that.
Nice. That's an amazing result. Anyhow, it was gotten.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah. And I know that just from the stories that you've told and everything, that I definitely have some people in mind. I'm like, okay, some people, because the other thing is, I think I like about your product is it's such a broad profile that even if the person doesn't eat veggies or refuses to or won't eat certain foods they should be eating, they're covered if they can just get that into a shake, right? And everybody likes shakes. So
when I make a smoothie, my smoothies they're not a McDonald's milkshake. They don't taste like that, right? But they're not bad. But I've come to enjoy them. But they're mixtures of berries, and because what I'm trying to do in that smoothie is take the best of everything. So I have my product, I have a blend of power greens, all organic, a blend of organic berries, nuts and seeds. And our number one killer is heart disease. And yet, if you look at the studies on nuts and seeds, the people that have 5 servings or more compared to 1 or less, and they have less than half the heart disease risk. And it's so easy, and it's good for all these other things. It's good for your skin, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to cover as much as I can in this one little smoothie a day that tastes pretty good. I won't say that it's, just to be honest, it's when I make one, I know how to make one where it's got cow, peanut butter, plant-based milk, and a banana. Yeah, it tastes really good. It's not as healthy as the one that I make, but that's at least a good start. And it has my product in it, and cacao is super healthy, et cetera, et cetera.
Love it. Okay, great. Awesome. If somebody wants to get some more information about everything you've gone over today, or get a hold of the shakes, or reach out and get more information from a person, how would they go about doing that?
The best way would be to go onto the website, sosnutrients.com. So SOS, just like giving, save our souls, SOS, and then nutrients.com. That is the best way. We're on Instagram. I'm going to create a YouTube channel, and we're on LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. But the best form of information by far is the website. And if anybody wants to jump on a call or on a Zoom, I'm happy to do it. Again, this is my passion, and I really want to impact people's lives. So I'm happy to jump on and go over some things.
Awesome. That sounds great. Awesome. And is there anything else you would like to share that we didn't cover on the questions we went over, or in what we talked about?
I guess the one final thing that I would say is we have tremendous ability to undo damages. And there are multiple ways to do it. It's not just nutrition, right? There's exercise, and there's how you're thinking about things. And I've done these podcasts on your mental state and how that impacts health. There are all these other things, but nutrition is a bedrock. And if people really start there, it's a very good start to have a very different experience, and it impacts things like depression substantially. So it doesn't just end with, are your bones good or anti-cancer, or energy level. There are many other benefits of it as well.
Nice. Awesome. Totally agreed. And I love your information. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure. I've learned several things, and I'm so happy to be able to share this with my audience and whoever ends up listening to our little conversation here.
Brian, great meeting you. Really enjoyed being on here with you. And so thanks for having me.
Absolutely.